After pulling back support for the US-led war in Iran, a key NATO ally has delivered what many are calling the sharpest insult yet toward President Trump, shaking the alliance's unity. In a stunning rebuke, one NATO nation openly condemned Trump's military offensive in the Middle East, even going so far as to draw direct comparisons between him and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Just as I believe that, in relations with Russia, there will be no going back to the way things were before the 24th of February, 2022, so I believe that, in transatlantic relations, there will be no going back to the way things were before the 20th of January, 2025. The rupture is too deep and the loss of trust in American superpower politics is evident not only among our allies, but, as you can see at least as clearly as I do, worldwide. Across Europe, leaders appear to be uniting in criticism of Washington's approach, collectively denouncing Trump's reliance on brute force and what they describe as a dangerous might is right philosophy. Analysts now warn that transatlantic ties may have been damaged beyond repair, as the war in Iran spirals further out of control and European governments distance themselves from US policy. On March 24th, the German president delivered a powerful and stinging condemnation of US President Donald Trump's war in Iran, marking one of Berlin's most outspoken criticisms of Washington in recent years. In a harsh and unflinching statement, Frank Walter Steinmeier directly compared President Trump to Russian leader Vladimir Putin, accusing both of undermining global stability through reckless decisions. Steinmeier went further, saying that both leaders had effectively destroyed their nation's long-standing bonds with Europe, leaving a deep rupture in diplomatic trust. He warned that there was now no going back for the transatlantic alliance, suggesting a permanent shift in Europe's relationship with the United States. Our foreign policy does not become any more convincing simply because we do not call a breach of international law a breach of international law. We had to grapple with this during the Gaza war, and we must address this with regard to the war in Iran. For, in my view, this war is contrary to international law. There is little doubt that, in any case, the justification of an imminent attack on the US does not hold water. This seems to be the view currently held in parts of the American intelligence services as well. Furthermore, this war is, please forgive me for saying so, as someone involved, a politically disastrous mistake, and what frustrates me most is that it is a truly avoidable one, an unnecessary war if its aim was to stop Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. The current US administration has a different worldview to ours, one that shows no regard for established rules, partnership, or hard-won trust. We cannot change that. We have to deal with it. But, and this is my conviction, we have no reason to align ourselves with this worldview. The major powers may survive in a world without rules, in the short term perhaps. In the short term, they might even benefit. That does not apply to us. Just as I believe that, in relations with Russia, there will be no going back to the way things were before the 24th of February, 2022, so I believe that, in transatlantic relations, there will be no going back to the way things were before the 20th of January, 2025. The rupture is too deep and the loss of trust in American superpower politics is evident not only among our allies, but, as you can see at least as clearly as I do, worldwide. German President Frank Walter Steinmeier said the nuclear deal negotiated during the Obama era would have been the most effective and responsible path to stop Iran from ever obtaining nuclear weapons. It's worth recalling that US President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from that same agreement back in 2018, dismissing it as a horrible and one-sided deal that he claimed favored Tehran. President Frank Walter Steinmeier's recent rebuke of Washington's actions is being described by analysts as one of the strongest and most direct statements ever issued by the German presidency. This fresh wave of criticism comes at a time when diplomatic relations between the United States and Germany are already strained, reflecting growing frustration within Berlin over American foreign policy. Reports suggest that ties worsened under Donald Trump's leadership due to his perceived sympathy toward Russia, his bizarre threats to invade Greenland, and the imposition of steep tariffs on European goods. Adding to the shifting dynamics, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz now appears to have modified his earlier position on the war against Iran, signaling a change in tone from his initial remarks. Just days after the conflict began, Merz had stated that Iran did not deserve the protections offered by international law, accusing Tehran of undermining global norms through its own actions. At the time, he also asserted that Iran itself showed no respect for international law, justifying a tougher response from Western powers. However, Berlin's stance has since cooled, as many within the government now question the merits of the war, viewing Trump's approach as impulsive and lacking any credible path toward achieving a ceasefire. The German Chancellor said, quote, "To this day, There is no convincing plan as to how this operation could succeed. Washington has not consulted us and has not deemed European assistance necessary, unquote. European leaders have begun openly questioning the legality of the ongoing war against Iran, warning that the conflict risks becoming a dangerous distraction from the still unresolved war in Ukraine. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has refused to grant the United States permission to use Spanish bases for operations against Iran, openly labeling the war as illegal and contrary to international norms. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and French President Emmanuel Macron have both echoed that sentiment, arguing that the current strikes against Iran fall outside the boundaries of international law. In London, Prime Minister Keir Starmer signed a joint declaration with 21 other European nations denouncing Iran's actions, marking a rare show of unity among European powers. The statement specifically condemned Tehran's attacks on commercial vessels in the Gulf and its recent closure of the Strait of Hormuz, calling these moves dangerous provocations against global trade. Notably, Britain's Attorney General, Richard Hermer, warned that ignoring international law could lead to what he called a world without rules, where power overrides principle. In a pointed remark seen as a veiled criticism of Donald Trump, Hermer added that Britain must not embrace a might is right approach, insisting that global order depends on respect for lawful conduct. The United States, representing the world's largest military power, faces a conflict where conventional advantages have yet to yield a decisive outcome against Iran's adaptive defensive posture. U.S. military expenditures constitute approximately 37% of global totals, while Iran maintains spending below 1%, highlighting stark disparities in resource allocation and sustainment capacities. Despite this apparent mismatch in conventional capabilities, Iran has conducted operations challenging U.S. assets through asymmetric approaches and calculated risk engagements. Tehran's strategy counters superior Israeli and U.S. firepower by emphasizing insurgent-style tactics that prioritize prolonged resistance over direct battlefield superiority. Iran focuses on endurance-based methods, avoiding decisive frontal engagements while leveraging geographic and operational advantages for sustained pressure. Historical precedents from Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan demonstrate that overwhelming conventional strength frequently fails against persistent insurgent methodologies and political warfare. Tehran employs four principal tactics designed to compel eventual U.S. disengagement from the conflict, according to strategic analysts assessing current dynamics. The primary tactic centers on controlled escalation through strikes against U.S. bases and regional infrastructure throughout the Gulf theater. This approach aims to elevate domestic political costs within the United States by extending the conflict's duration and financial requirements. A recent Reuters Ipsos survey indicated only 27% of Americans currently support continued military involvement against Iran. Simultaneously, sustained aerial campaigns risk reinforcing internal cohesion within Iran by framing external attacks as existential threats. Even regime critics may perceive the confrontation as a broader national survival imperative under prolonged bombardment conditions. Conversely, successful provocation drawing U.S. ground forces into Iran would facilitate transition to comprehensive insurgency operations at elevated personnel costs. This approach would position Iran advantageously to transition into an insurgency framework, imposing exponentially higher personnel casualties on U.S. forces. A second approach, termed spoiling, systematically targets Gulf allies including Saudi Arabia and the UAE to disrupt coalition cohesion. While neighboring coexistence remains a post-war consideration, the strategy exploits long-term Gulf reliance on U.S. security commitments. Decades of dependence position Gulf states as vulnerable to economic pressure tactics that strain bilateral defense arrangements. By compromising critical economic interests, Iran seeks to erode confidence in U.S. protection guarantees across the alliance structure. Gradual coalition weakening could recalibrate regional influence dynamics to Iran's strategic advantage over extended timelines. The third tactic leverages asymmetric maritime warfare with light, agile assets suited to the Gulf's confined littoral environment. Fast attack boats, naval mines, and compact submarines optimize effectiveness in shallow, cluttered operational waters. Following attrition of conventional naval elements, Iran redirected efforts toward Hormuz Strait transit interdiction protocols. This positioning grants disproportionate control over a globally significant choke point despite constrained material inventories. The resulting restrictions have materially disrupted hydrocarbon, gas, and commercial flows through constrained maritime pathways. The fourth tactic incorporates precision strikes against civilian infrastructure, including airports and desalination facilities. Such operations generate psychological strain, economic ripple effects, and heightened operational stakes for responding forces. Global ramifications amplify through elevated energy costs and interrupted supply networks across dependent markets. Collectively, these methodologies prolong engagement duration, rendering the conflict progressively unsustainable across political and fiscal dimensions.